Welcome back. In the last lesson, we've almost completed sculpting the body model. Now, we need to further increase the mesh density to sculpt more details. Without further ado, let's start today's lesson. Before increasing the mesh density, let's be thorough and comprehensively check our model one last time. In fact, at this stage, the body's effect is already achieved, and we can proceed to topology. But the paws still look a bit rough, so we need to increase the mesh density to refine the paws. Let's find Remesh from the top. Let's adjust the voxel size to increase the mesh density and then click Remesh. You can see that the mesh density is now high enough for more detailed sculpting. Now, the mesh has become very dense, seemingly enough for sculpting the head, which we'll attempt shortly. Now let's continue refining the front and hind paws. We'll work on the interdigital space during topology. For now, let's sculpt the foot structure. Here are the main joints of the toes. And here are the structures where nails grow. From the side view, you can see how the bones grow on the toes. When we sculpt the paws, each toe, pad, and bone actually corresponds. For example, the paw here is a long bone that grows all the way down to where it connects with the toes. Let me mark it on the model surface. Change the brush color. There is a joint here, and the bone grows until here. The joints of the toes grow in this way, and the nails grow in the front, the position of the joint that corresponds to the paw pad's position. For example, this joint corresponds to this foot pad below, and this joint of the toe corresponds to this foot pad below. So we have to pay attention to that. Okay, let's delete the color. Let's continue sculpting. Next, let's focus on sculpting the foot structures. In the previous stage, we've already created the basic structure of the feet. Here, we need to further define the shape of the structures. The sole is still rough. Let's refine the structure of the sole. That looks all right. Let's continue adjusting the overall shape of the foot. After sculpting the toes, let's refine the structure of the paws together. The hind paws are refined. Let's adjust the body part next. Actually, there's no need for detailed refinement on the body. We mainly make the joints and connections between structures more defined. Now let's make the joint at the ankle clearer. I'm using the Draw Sharp brush now. Holding Shift allows us to sculpt in the opposite way, creating clearer structural contours. Direct sculpting can also make the grooves clearer. This structure needs to be a bit thinner. Let's take an overall look. Looks good. Alright, we've sculpted the hind paws to this point. Let's continue to observe the body part. The tail seems curved. Let's adjust it with grab brush. With increased mesh density, we can also sculpt more details on the body. We can add some more detailed textures, but we need to control ourselves as most parts of the body are covered with fur and don't require excessive detailing. We can spend more time on other parts instead of the detailing here. Let's add more detail to the muscle structure in the front shoulders. We can draw some random strokes following the muscle direction on the surface to make the connections between structures more natural. Then, let's make the structures and joints of the front legs more prominent. At this stage, we mainly use the Draw Sharp brush, followed by the Draw brush. Next is the lower leg part. Let's go back to the panoramic view to observe our model. After refining the front legs, they look much better. The structures sculpted behind the front legs look unnatural. Let's use clay strips brush and draw some random strokes along the structure's direction to make it look more natural, then smooth it out. Looks much better now. Let's do the same for the lower part here. Alright, looks good for now. Let's make the silhouette behind the ribs more prominent with draw brush. Okay, leave this effect for now. We can notice some structural issues on the body, but it's now more difficult to adjust the rough shape of the structure due to the high mesh density, making it less suitable for large-scale adjustments. We'll leave it like this for now, and it will be easier to adjust after completing the topology later. Now, let's refine the front paws. Let's review the process of sculpting the feet. First, we identify the key points on the toes. The point in each gap between toes is the lowest point on the foot surface. Let's sculpt it first. Then, the key bone point on the toes. This point is the highest point on the foot surface. Next, let's adjust the positions and proportions of the 4 toes. The middle 2 toes are the highest and most prominent, while the outer ones are shorter. From the front view, they form an arc-like contour. Now, let's sculpt the bone shape of the metacarpus. Next, let's detail each toe. Currently, the middle part of each toe seems connected, and the silhouettes are blurry. As we've reached the back of the foot, let's sculpt a small heel here. Then sculpt the structures growing on top. Alright, let's go back to the feet. At this point, we've almost completed sculpting the paw structure. Let's switch to the orthographic side view, ensuring the toes' bottoms align perfectly with the ground. The front feet have extended below the ground, while the hind feet are somewhat elevated. Let's adjust the position of all feet accordingly. Alright, don't forget to sculpt the dew claws on the front feet. Let's sculpt them now, but note that this toe is shorter. Alright, the dew claws are completed. Due to the current mesh, it's inconvenient to separate the toes now. So we'll keep the current effect and separate the toes during the topology stage. Now, the body sculpting is complete. Next, we'll continue with the head sculpting. Next, we are going to sculpt the head. Before that, let's cover several major bone points of the head. We've covered those in previous lessons. Now let's review the three most important bone points: the brow ridge, the cheekbone, and the jawbone. The head's mesh density is quite high at the moment. Let's smooth out the head mesh first. Let's find the references of the head. And quickly sculpt the basic structure of the head based on our previous analysis. The head is still in a rough state, not yet ready for detailing. However, due to the high mesh density, adjusting the big shape is challenging, especially when using smooth brush, which requires repeated strokes to achieve the desired effect. These issues make it inconvenient to adjust the big shape while sculpting. Let's give it a try, but if this goes on, we will consider sculpting the head separately. At this stage, similar to when we started sculpting the body, our goal is only to shape the basic forms of each structure without detailing. The ear is missing a structure of the accessory auricle. Let's sculpt this out, reminiscent of the dew claw on the foreleg. Isn't it similar? The back of the ear is somewhat flat, and in wolves, as in humans, the conchus forms a bulging contour on the back. The outermost part is quite thin. We'll go to an angle similar to the reference image, which makes it easier to observe and adjust the model. The adjustments for the ear's rough shape are sufficient for now. Let's continue adjusting the facial part. Find the position of the eyes and use draw brush to sculpt out the indentation that contains the eye. Then let's create a model for the eyeball. Press Shift+A to create a new UV sphere in the scene, which we'll use to model the eyeball. Hover the cursor over the eye position, then left-click to move the cursor to the eye position. Next, press Shift+S and choose Selection to Cursor to move the sphere directly to the eye position. Press S to scale it to the appropriate size. Then we enter Edit mode by pressing Tab. The sphere needs to be rotated 90 degrees. Press R and enter 90. Continue to scale to the appropriate size and move to the approximate position. The eyeball consists of two layers, the outer vitreous and the inner iris and pupil. The structure of the eye is an outer layer wrapping the inside. We need to enlarge the eye a bit more. We duplicate the sphere and first create the inner iris and pupil. Enter Edit mode, and we select the faces of the pupil and iris part. Then switch the transformation orientation to normal to adjust it conveniently. Next, we change the pivot point to median point and move the model with Move tool. Currently, the fall-off is turned on, and we need to decrease its range a little bit. Let's work on the mesh and create the edges of the pupil and iris. Here we select the outermost circle of edges of the iris, press Ctrl+B to create a bevel, thus forming the edge of the iris. The model of the pupil and iris is quickly completed. Display the vitreous body. It needs to wrap the inner model up, so we scale it a little bit bigger. It's different in that its front is somewhat protruding. Select the foremost face and move it forward. We need to make the contour on the front curved. Clearly, the current number of edges is insufficient. Press Ctrl+R to insert a loop of edges in the middle, then adjust its shape. Select this circle of edges and perform another bevel to create a distinct edge. Bevel the very front as well. Good, it's basically done. Quite simple, right? After adjusting, we merge the two models. Now we can move the eyeball to the correct position. We enter the top view and switch to wireframe display mode. Place the eyeball model in the appropriate position. Then we apply the eyeball model's location properties to default values. Press Ctrl+A and select Location. Then we find the modifier panel and add a mirror modifier here. The rotation and scale values also affect the mirror effect, so we apply the rotation and scale properties to default values as well. The purpose of adding eyeballs is to adjust the structure of the eye socket based on the shape of the eyeballs. When creating the structure of the eyes, we need to identify 2 points, the inner and outer eye corners, and determine their relative positions in the front and side views. First, let's adjust the shape of the eyes from the side view. Find the reference for the side view. We saw that the upper eyelid is more forward than the lower eyelid according to the side view references. Let's adjust its shape accordingly. We'll also refine the structures around the eyes. Currently, there are quite a few issues with the rough shape of the head that need to be adjusted, but the high mesh density makes it inconvenient. We need to separate the head for sculpting. Copy the body. Set the name of the original model to Body, representing the body model. Enter Edit mode and delete vertices outside the head. Note that we need to enter wireframe mode. After selecting the body parts mesh, we directly press X and choose vertices. The body part is deleted. Then, we select the entire mesh and press F to fill the blank. Thus, we can readjust the mesh density of the head with Remesh. Press R to observe and adjust to a suitable density. Then Remesh. Alright, with the mesh issue resolved, let's continue sculpting. First, check the position of the eyes against the reference. Let's refer to the front view reference and observe the space between the eyes and their relative position to the ears. We notice that the space between the eyes is somewhat wide, leading to unfocused eyes. Let's directly adjust the position of the eyes. First, use Grab Brush in Sculpt mode to adjust the mesh. Then select the eye model to adjust the eyeball's position in Edit mode. It's important to change the transformation orientation to Global mode. Fix the structure of the eye socket slightly. Next, we are going to observe and adjust the model against references from different angles. There's a depression in the middle of the forehead. Let's draw it, making the forehead part a bit fuller. Back to our main reference of head in the perspective view. Go to a similar angle. We need to refine the structure of the upper eyelid according to the reference. Around the eyes, we find a diagonal structure below the upper eyelid. That is the lower eye socket. Let's sculpt this structure out directly with the brush. Just like our previous analysis, there will be a face here. Let's make the rough structure of the nose. This is the position of the nostrils. Continue to create the structure for the front part of the mouth. Let's draw the shape of it. Besides its overall position, an important point to note is the corners of the mouth. We can observe and see the corners of the mouth are aligned with the outer eye corners, roughly on a vertical line, which allows us to quickly find the position of the mouth corners. Next, let's create the bridge of the nose. Which, according to the reference, is shaped like a slight arc. From the side view reference, the position of the nasal bone is a bit forward in the middle of the nose bridge, and further forward is the nasal cartilage. Here is a bone point. We then create the side contour. Identifying several main transition points from our early analysis. After completing the side view, we find the front view reference for structural analysis. Adjust the structure against the front view reference. Now, we've basically completed adjustment of the model's rough shape according to the references. Next, let's begin refining the structures. Before starting the refinement, we need to increase the mesh density. So find Remesh tool, turn down the value, and click Remesh. We'll start with the forehead. By observing, we can roughly determine the structural shape. Here at the upper eyelid, there's a structure similar to human double eyelids. However, at this stage, we should not sculpt these details because the basic form of the eyes has not yet been adjusted to the appropriate level. Sculpting these detailed structures too early would affect our observation and thought. Smooth out this structure by holding Shift, retaining only a rough contour. Let's focus on the basic forms first, get the foundational structure right, and then move on to the next step. Let's find out the front view references and sculpt the structure of the eye sockets based on what we've observed. The mouth area is still quite rough. We need to refine it further. And continue sculpting the basic structure of the nose. This is the contour of the nose. Let's sculpt out the nostrils. This stage is similar to when we sculpted the body. We won't sculpt detailed shapes or strive for precision in every area. Our goal is to shape the basic forms, creating a stable foundation for later detailing. When refining the structure around the eyes, we still need to sculpt based on the reference form. The method of observation when detailing each structure is the same as the one we explained in the reference analysis section for analyzing the head. We'll analyze more detailed structural lines and turning points from the reference image, just like now. It should feel familiar because it's essentially applying the analysis method to these structures again. Of course, before sculpting these structures, we must first ensure that the overall form and proportions of the head are basically correct. Next, we'll use the same method to sculpt all the structures of the head. And we can freely switch among these different views as needed during sculpting. Switch back to turntable mode to continue sculpting. The nose is divided into 3 surfaces: the front, the top, and the sides. We just need to find the intersection of these 3 surfaces to directly sculpt the volume of the nose. Next, based on what we've observed, we'll further refine the basic form of the nose. On the side, the structure similar to the nostril wings has not yet been made. We use grab brush to directly drag this area out. We can observe and adjust the structure of the nose, mouth, and bridge of the nose from different angles. There's actually a boundary below the nose, separating the nose from the mouth and the rest of the head, where there's a groove. We try to draw out the rough shape. The groove in the middle of the mouth is also sculpted out. With these modifications, the basic form of the nose is almost complete. Let's continue with the other parts. Back to the forehead. The current model's forehead part seems a bit too square. Compared to the reference, the shape of the forehead obviously has issues. We directly draw the main structural lines on the surface. Then we fill in the middle part of the structural lines, and that's it. On the side, this is the structure of the zygomatic bone. Continuing down to the location of the masseter muscle. Wolves are wild carnivores, so their masseter muscles are more pronounced, giving them a stronger bite force. We return to the front view to continue observing whether the model's structure and contours have issues. During the stage of creating the model's overall basic form, after completing each structure, we need to return to the panoramic view and repeatedly observe the overall effect of the model to ensure the correctness of the basic form. That is, our main focus is currently on the overall effect. Local effects are not yet within our consideration. The gap in the mouth still needs to be more defined. Just like the gaps between toes, we won't continue to sculpt the details inside the mouth during the sculpting stage. We'll do that later during topology creation. Here we just need to ensure that the appearance looks correct. Adjust the contour of the mouth from the bottom view. The shape of the eyes greatly affects the facial temperament of a creature. Therefore, when portraying the facial image, the shape of the eyes is also one of our main focuses. When shaping the eyes, we need to be as accurate as possible. At this time, we need to find a few main turning points of the eye contour, a method I've mentioned before in the analysis reference section. Here we use the same method, find a few turning points on the eyes, and connect them into a line, thus accurately forming the shape of the eyes. As we gradually refine, the structure of the head has become much more complete. Next, we need to further sculpt the ear part. Currently, the structure of the ears is mostly in its initial state, with few details, just the large frame. We need to further refine and create the structure inside the ear, which is the conchus part, as well as the accessory auricle structure of the ear. The edge of the accessory auricle is a bit thin, and it's difficult to control with regular sculpting tools. We use Inflate tool to modify the structure here. Inflate tool is commonly used when sculpting thin structures like ears. The inside of the ear is actually not visible and is mostly covered and obscured by fur, so in fact, we don't need to sculpt many details. To enrich the structure of the conchus, we'll sculpt some random concavities and convexities to make the interior look more realistic. When sculpting, we follow the direction of the ear. It's important to note that although the ear is covered by fur and won't reveal details, the ear part usually has a special material effect called subsurface scattering. Simply put, it's a material that simulates skin texture. When light passes through the skin, it bounces inside and then passes through the skin to form a translucent material texture. We usually refer to it as SSS. In places like the ear where it's quite thin, the effect of SSS is very obvious, and the thickness of the model affects the SSS effect. Therefore, when sculpting the ear, we should match the real structure as closely as possible. From this angle, the ear looks a bit short. It needs to be lengthened. After adjusting, the ear looks much better. Let's continue modifying the facial structure. To summarize the model-making process so far, it's actually a repeated refinement of the model. The first pass is the large frame, a framework. The second pass further refines the framework, adding more structures. The third pass refines each structure individually, and the fourth pass is the final perfection of the model, sculpting details. In essence, that's it. When sculpting, we need to pay attention to another principle, which is overall progression. This term means that all parts maintain the same level of detail at each stage. If it's the large frame stage, then all structures are large frames. You might wonder, just like when I was sculpting the body, the head wasn't touched at all, and after the body was sculpted, the head had no details. Is this wrong? Actually, it depends on the sculpting approach. Because before we sculpted this wolf model, we had already determined the production approach. The head and body would be made separately. In my view, the head is different from the limbs. The structure of the head is much more complex, with many factors to consider. Sculpting separately allows me to focus more on shaping important parts. Therefore, when sculpting the body, the head was basically not made. Only the basic shape was created. I hope everyone can understand this point. The approach before the initial production is also very important. It's been a long time, so I'll stop here for now in this lesson, and we'll continue making it in the next lesson. Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to continue with the remaining structures from our previous lessons. Alright, now let's continue with the production. At this stage, we've actually started detailing each structure. The primary form stage is basically complete. After a rigorous inspection of the basic form during the large form stage, the basic form is basically fine, and we can start sculpting details. Starting with the eyes, we first make the structural lines around the eyes, also known as the edges of the structure, more defined. Then observe from different angles. We need to move the eyeball model a bit outward. The eyeball needs to match the shape of the eye socket. Good, the eye part looks much better now. Moving forward, continue making the nose and mouth parts. Further refine these two parts. The perspective view reference is good for observing structures. We find the perspective view reference image. Go to the same angle. From this angle, we can directly see many issues. There are still issues with the basic shape of the nose. We first modify the basic shape. Take another distant look at the model, observing the overall form of the model. I noticed that through this reference, we can also observe the contour of the eye part from the same angle. Previously, in the front view reference, we couldn't observe the structure of the eye corners. Now, through the perspective view, the structure of the eye corners still seems to have some issues. Let's put aside the nose issue for now and modify the structure of the eye corners. In this perspective view reference, we can see more content. We'll compare with the perspective view reference again and further refine the facial structure we've already sculpted. When we view the model from the bottom, we can see a key structure called the mandible. It's similar to the human structure, which can be seen stretching from below the ear to the chin. So we directly draw the structure of the mandible. Viewing the model from this inverted perspective is also a method of observation. When inverted, we can focus more purely on whether the contours are correct without being influenced by various structural knowledge. Alright, let's return to the normal perspective and continue refining the facial structure in the perspective view. The upper eyelid is now basically hugging the eyeball. Based on our previous observations from the side view, the upper eyelid should be a bit more forward than the lower eyelid. Adjust the structure of the upper eyelid from different angles. The eyelid should wrap around the eyeball. There's an obvious issue when viewed from the bottom. Oops, the shape of the eye has been distorted due to structural modifications. Let's adjust the shape back. This situation often occurs in the later stages of model refinement, with repeated improvements and modifications. The middle part of the eye is not a completely bulging structure. There should be an inward depression in the center. Good. We've made many adjustments just now. Let's continue with the mouth and nose. We resume our work, refining the structure of the nose and mouth. From the current view, the nose shape is too square. The nostrils don't need to be too large, as oversized nostrils can affect the facial appearance. We need to find more references to observe the shape of the nose and make further adjustments. Continue with the bottom view, observing the model from below and adjusting the shape. There are some issues with the contour of the lower jaw, so we use mask tool to lock the upper mouth. Add some more mask to the corner of the mouth. A part here has been omitted. Alright, we directly adjust the position of the lower mouth, using grab brush with an increased radius to drag. Find the side view reference of the head and adjust according to the reference image. After adjustments, it is almost done of the lower jaw observing from the side view. Press Alt+M to clear the mask. We check the model's contour against the side view reference for any issues. The position of the eyes seems a bit low, and the brow ridge area a bit high. Let's adjust that. The corners of the mouth are not right. There are currently no corners, so let's modify this area. We directly sculpt the shape of the mouth corners. Okay, it looks good. Then let's adjust the lower jaw according to the references of different angles. From this angle, we can also observe the shape of the upper lip and nose. Let's further refine the structure of the nose. The shape of the nose still needs modification. In this reference, we can observe some details in the shape of the nose. Let's sculpt the details of the nose according to the reference. Next, we continue adjusting the eyes. The structure of the eyes still needs further refinement. Overall, it looks basically fine, but upon closer inspection, the structure of the two eye corners is still rough, leaving only a rough shape. Currently, the number of faces for sculpting the eye corners is insufficient, preventing us from sculpting an accurate shape. However, since the overall number of faces on the head is high, we cannot blindly increase the number of faces. We will sculpt as much detail as possible with the current number of faces. From a distance, the expression conveyed by the eyes feels alright. The shape of the eyes is basically like this and won't be modified further. Up to now, we have already refined all the facial structures once, and the issues identified have all been basically resolved. Next, we are going to repeatedly observe and adjust the model from different angles. We can observe the contour of the mouth from the same angle according to this reference image. Alright, we continue to adjust the structure of the forehead according to the reference image. Our main goal now is actually to add more details while checking and improving the already sculpted structures in a new round. We pick a different reference image of different angles and continue observing and adjusting the model. This reference image is more of a perspective view. We adjust the model to a similar angle and adjust the model's outer contour. At this stage, our main modifications are actually the contours. By observing what can be seen from the same angle in the reference, what shape it is, and then comparing it to the effect of our model. Next, we continue observing from this angle, checking the structural form on our model, and making minor adjustments. What I want to say here is that we don't need to completely replicate the shape in the reference for every observation. Don't fall into this trap. Otherwise, our model will never be finished because every different wolf in the pictures has a different appearance, different effects. Previously, we already had the main reference for the head's appearance, and we found references from 3 angles: front view, perspective view, and side view. These main references depict the appearance and shape of the main facial features in the model. Later, our main purpose of modifying according to these different references of different angles is to check the rationality of the structure. For example, from the same angle, observe whether the eyes are too protruding, whether the cheekbones are too high, etc., until the structure looks comfortable and natural. So, actually, at this stage, we have basically finished, and now we are in the process of checking, modifying, and improving our work. In this stage, our operations are also cautious, improving the quality of the work while ensuring not to disrupt the existing structure. Next, let's move to the front view and adjust the shape of the eyes. The eyes have significant impacts on the character, as different eye shapes convey different expressions. We have previously analyzed the main turning points of the eyes. Among them, this point is the most important turning point. The angle formed by the lines connecting it with the 2 points below and to the left has a considerable impact on the effect. Then there are a few other turning points. We need to move this point down a bit on the model, and then correspondingly adjust the positions of the other turning points. The orientation of the eyeball model inside is incorrect. Select the eyeball model, enter Edit Mode, and select the entire mesh. Then double-tap R to turn on Global Rotation Mode, rotating to the appropriate angle. Now, the eyes look much better. Continue to adjust the shape of the eyes in Sculpt mode. Wolves have a structure similar to human double eyelids, which we also need to create. Using Draw Sharp brush, we draw the crease of the eyelid very slightly. Now, the eyes look much better overall. Finally, we check the overall effect of the head. The overall facial effect feels quite good to me. It's basically complete. The ears are somewhat rough, so we are going to sculpt out some details inside the ears. The eyes are too low. Use Grab Brush to move the eyes up a bit. After adjusting, the eyeball model also needs to be moved to match the shape and position of the eye socket. Currently, the ears seem a bit large. We compare with the reference again. Since the head in the reference is covered with fur, the ears appear smaller than what we've made, but this is normal, so we'll keep the model as is for now. Now, let's finalize and perfect the head model. Let's display the body and observe the model's overall effect. The head part needs to be removed from the body model. Select the body model, enter Edit mode, and directly select and delete the head part. Overall, it looks okay, but there's something wrong with the mouth part. We find a side view reference. Compare it with the model to identify the issues. Currently, the model is too small, not quite like a wolf. We select the head and enter Sculpt mode for adjustments. An additional reminder: if you find the brush not working, it might be due to accidentally enabling an auto mask feature. Check these options and turn off any mistakenly activated to ensure the brush correctly affects the model. Let's continue adjusting the mouth part. Wolves are carnivores with a nature that dictates a larger mouth and stronger jaw muscles than dogs. So we adjust the mouth again. When we adjusted the mouth just now, the eye part was also affected, and the eyeball model inside needs corresponding adjustments. Move it forward a bit to match the shape of the eyelids. Alright, after the adjustments, I feel the effect is much better. Now we return to the panoramic view to observe the model from multiple angles and check for issues. At this point, we've completed sculpting the high poly model. In the next session, we'll start with retopology. Before that, everyone can do a final review of the model. That's all for this session. See you in the next one. Before we start, let's first talk about topology. In simple terms, topology refers to the overall mesh structure of a model, representing the distribution of vertices, edges, and faces for the model. A good topology is very beneficial for subsequent processes such as rigging, animation, hair, rendering, and other phases. Here, we can see there are two models in the scene, and at this phase, our focus is on their meshes. As shown in the scene, the model on the right has a good topology. We can use this topology to get good results when proceeding with texturing, hair, rigging, and animation. The model on the left has incorrect topology with a chaotic wireframe distribution. It cannot be used in rigging, animation, or hair, and it is only usable for still frame effects. A key concept in topology is edge flow, which essentially optimizes the mesh's topology. In the creation of biological models, to improve the deforming's performance of the model in animating, we should always make the edge flow according to the model's biological structure and directions of muscles. Here, we'll use these two models as case study. The model on the right has a good distribution of mesh density, even without any mesh errors. Maybe we can use it for rigging and other subsequent processes as well, but its edge flow is not ideal. Here, the edge flow serves to optimize the meshes. With the edge flow, we'll properly distribute the vertices, edges, and faces to refine the meshes and achieve a better topology. Next, we'll focus on the model on the left, which has a wireframe appearance that many might find familiar. Let's analyze this edge flow from the principles of topology to understand why this approach is commonly used instead of the other two. In biological motion, muscles are the primary drivers. For instance, changes in facial expressions are mainly caused by the contraction and relaxation of facial muscles. The muscles around the mouth drive its movements, allowing for opening, smiling, or crying. The main basis for the edge flow is the pattern of biological motions and muscle directions. This may be a bit abstract, so let's analyze it directly with this model. Firstly, let's look at the mouth. From the inside to the outside of the mouth, layers of circles are distributed, each circle forming a loop. Now let's look at the muscles around the mouth. There's a major muscle around the mouth called the orbicularis oris muscle. This muscle drives the movement of the mouth, and it is in this same posture that it is distributed around the mouth, allowing for a variety of mouth expressions, like raising the corners of mouth when smiling, or drooping the corners of the mouth when sad. When yawning and speaking, the action of opening the mouth is driven by the orbicularis oris muscle. And there is also a muscle around the eyes, which is called the orbicularis oculi muscle. It is distributed in loops around the eyes and dominates the movement around the eyes. If we want to present accurate deformation, it is essential to ensure the edge flow to be performed based on the directions of muscles. This concept will be applied when creating the wolf model later. Another basis for the edge flow is the pattern of movements. Let's come to another demonstration scene. We've established a cube and an armature. They represent human structures of arms, legs, and other parts. For the arms and legs, they also have a complex distribution of muscles, similar to that of the face areas. But there is a difference in muscles between the limbs and the face. The muscles distributed in other parts of the body move with the bones to complete various actions. Other than the stretching and squeezing caused by movements, there's not much muscle deformation. So the main basis of the edge flow in these parts is based on our observation of their movement patterns. Just like what we can see here, denser edges are distributed at the places where there are more bends, and circle edges perpendicular to the bones are used for the edge flow, allowing for good deformation. Okay, I understand if this might be a bit confusing, but don't worry. We'll apply these theoretical concepts practically in our later creation. In the creation of animal models, first, each face of the model must maintain an entirely quad polygon to ensure smooth and natural surface deformations, as triangle faces can easily cause tearing and distortion issues. Second, the density and shapes of the meshes should be distributed as evenly as possible. This needs clarification. Let's discuss mesh density, which needs to be distributed properly according to the effects needed for different parts. For example, joints need more mesh supports. Like this object, there are 3 edges, and the other parts without bending contain few edges. The face and facial expressions needs more mesh supports as well due to the variety of movements. However, it's important to note that it is essential that the mesh density is even and the transition is smooth and natural. For example, it is wrong to distribute very dense edges at the areas where the elbow joints need more movement, while distributing very sparse edges on other body parts. The correct approach should be like this to achieve a natural distribution of mesh density. The shapes and density of the meshes are interconnected and squares are preferred, with even mesh distribution. Third, try to avoid non-manifold geometry, which refers to mesh errors like incorrect edge segments and unfilled holes. These can be checked using functions provided in Blender. They can help us quickly find any non-manifold geometry in the model. Now, let's cover a few special types of the edge flow with our third demo scene. Here, we have 3 planes representing 3 common types of edge flow in meshes. The first type presents a central vertex connected to 4 edges. The second type presents a central vertex connected to 5 edges. The third type presents a central vertex connected to 3 edges. We'll use a model created previously for explanation. The first type is most common. Nearly each area of the face of the model is covered with this type of mesh distribution. We'll focus on the second and third types. The second type is known as an E-pole, which is featured with a vertex connected to 5 edges. Typically, the E-poles are distributed at intersections of structures to constrain the range of motion between different parts. For example, we can see that the upper and lower parts and the side of the face are separated by this vertex, each area having a different edge flow. The same applies to the vertex separating the jaw from the neck. The third type is known as an N-pole, which is featured with a vertex connected to 3 edges. This type of edge flow directly changes the direction of the edges. Let's take the nasal ala as an example. This is how the wireframing works previously, but the edges change their directions at this tree star vertex. This is quite common in practical applications. For instance, if we want to add an edge from the forehead to the top of the head, we can directly use an N-pole to accomplish this. Let's create 2 N-poles here, so we can turn the edges toward a different direction. It's also important to note that N-poles and E-poles coexist, with the creation of N-poles producing E-poles. Well, that's all for the introduction to the pre-topology phase we need to discuss for now. Topology is a crucial phase in the whole model-making workflow. It affects the model's suitability for later phases. Therefore, understanding the principles of topology is essential. Today, many topology add-ons and software can help us quickly create meshes. But without understanding topology principles, we cannot evaluate whether the software-generated meshes are correct. Thus, even with powerful software supports, creating suitable meshes could be difficult. In our subsequent creation, we won't use any topology software or add-ons. Instead, we'll create meshes manually. I don't discourage using topology software or plugins, as they make our creation more convenient and faster. But it's not right to rely too much on them. Our main goal here is to ensure that everyone knows what kind of topology we want and what kind of topology is incorrect or unsuitable, no matter if we use software or manual methods. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we are going to talk about topology. Before we dive into that, let's recap what we covered last lesson. We mentioned 2 types of edge flow, N-pole and E-pole. E-pole is used to mark the boundaries of structures, end pole is used to change the direction of the edge. Thus, end pole and e-pole are very common in edge flow. Today, we'll focus primarily on e-pole. It should be determined at the beginning of edge flow because it represents the junctions between structures. So, one of its roles in edge flow is to guide the overall direction of the edge flow. Therefore, the first step in edge flow is to locate a few key e-poles. Let's start with some settings. Turn on snapping. Quickly set the snapping type to face. You can simply copy my settings for snapping here. Then create a new plane. By default, the new plane is created at the position of the 3D cursor. We need to restore it to the right position. Press Alt+G to reset its position. Press Tab to enter edit mode. Let's remove all edges and start topologizing from scratch. Let me enable screencast keys. Okay, let's proceed. End pole is used to connect different structures. We can find end poles at the junctions of structures. First, there's one at the front shoulder, representing the junction of the forelimbs with the back and abdomen. That's the first e-pole. The second one is at the hind leg, separating the hind leg from the back and abdomen. We mark an e-pole here. These are the two most important e-poles. Another one is here. Separating the chest from the abdomen. The three e-poles we've created are the most important in the entire body. The head will be specifically addressed when we topologize the head later. For now, it's just the body's part. We mainly topologize based on the movement patterns, and muscle directions serve as the auxiliary reference. Because body parts, like the legs, move according to the skeletal structure rather than muscle deformation. After the e-pole, we first roughly determine the direction of the edge flow. We mentioned that we would topologize based on movement rules for the body part. So we analyze and draw the approximate direction of the topology first. Switch to annotation brush. Here we need to set placement to surface so we can directly draw on the model surface. At the front shoulder, we determine the direction of the edges based on the direction of the muscles and bones. So, the direction here extends all the way to the neck. At the front leg, the shape of the edges extends from the neck to here. Then from here, we need to create the edge flow for the leg. This is our approximate direction for edge flow. For this part of the body, we can keep this edge flow. For the hind leg, first, based on the muscles, its muscle direction is like this. Then, vertically, the direction is like this. We draw the direction of the edges for the calf part. There may be an e-pole here, but currently, this is just an approximate idea of the edge direction. The specific position of the e-pole will be determined later in the process, as its position depends on the actual topology. For now, we can only determine the distribution of the main e-poles. After roughly determining this, and having defined the direction of the edges for the front and hind legs, we are going to start the creation process. After breaking down, you can capture it as your main references. Hide the annotations. Let's topologize the model for the front shoulder part according to our analysis before. Since we have enabled snapping, every vertex we extruded will snap to the surface of the model. The shortcut for extruding is E. You can see the shortcut displayed in the lower left corner. Add a mirror modifier. Then, in the options below, find Merge and Clipping and check them. This restricts the movement of vertices to only within the positive direction of the world's x-axis. The range of the scapula reaches here. We directly extrude vertices to this point. We are making the edge flow of the upper leg according to the analysis. Selecting this part of vertices and extruding the edges in this direction. An E-pole is also needed here to separate the front leg from the abdomen. Copy this E-pole, move it to the abdomen area. Right here, and modify its shape. Connect these two vertices and subdivide. Select these two vertices and merge them. The shortcut is M. You can see the shortcut displayed in the lower left corner. Directly extrude these vertices until the chest, separating the forelimb from the abdomen. There should be an E-pole too, because the chest part also needs to separate the front leg from the body. Press F to connect edges. Select an edge, press F, and 4 vertices automatically connect into a face. This operation is relatively quick. The shortcut for adding a middle point is Ctrl+R. Here, we need to create an edge like this. We've now filled the faces in the front of the chest part, and the topology here is basically complete. The current wireframe is still quite sparse. When we are working, all steps follow one rule, which is from the overall frame to details. Once we've determined the overall frame of the edge flow, Adding intermediate edges is very convenient and quick. For example, on this edge, since the edge flow is already determined and there are fewer edges, we can directly press Ctrl+R to add intermediate edges and adjust the number of edges by scrolling the mouse wheel. This makes adding edges very fast. So, for now, we're not in a rush to add more edges. First, we determine the overall direction of the edges, then continue to fill the faces in the shoulder area. Add an edge. Some faces are colored dark because of inverted normal direction. So, let's correct the face normal's direction. The shortcut for correcting normal direction is Shift+N. Select the entire mesh, press Shift+N, and all normal directions are corrected to the right direction. Checking normal direction is also simple. Here, click to find Face Orientation. Blue indicates the correct normal directions, and red indicates inverted. We can go inside the model to check. It is done for the side of the front shoulder. Let's work on the inner part. Here, we aim to create a loop of edges. Meaning these two vertices need to be connected by an edge. First, we connect these three vertices here with the three vertices on the other side, moving them here. Currently, there are too few edges, so we are adding more. Fill the inner faces. These two vertices lack enough edges for connection, so we need to find a way to route these vertices around to this area. Here, we use the end pole. We can create an end pole here to help us route the edges around. The edges here are now connected. Good, we used an end pole here. Originally, the edges were going along this way, but by adding an end pole, we changed the direction of the edges, making it turn down from here. This is the practical use of the end pole. We need to be careful with the edge flow here. because we are making it symmetrical. If this vertex is connected to here, once mirror modifier is applied, it would create a hexapole, meaning a vertex connected by 6 edges, which we want to avoid. So, let's delete this edge and add a new one here. We previously mentioned we need to create an E-pole here to separate the front leg from the chest. We directly select and extrude a vertex here, modifying the edge flow and making the edge flow of the chest suitable. We'll keep the edge flow of the front shoulder as is for now. If there are too few edges here, we can add one. If we want to add edges, we can add them now. The number of edges is determined by the desired density of the edges. However, since we are currently only working on the front shoulder part, we're not in a rush to add many edges. We only add a necessary number of edges for our edge flow. No need to be too dense. Let's stop topologizing the front shoulder. We are going to make the body part and the hind legs. Select the vertices behind the front leg and extrude them until here. Starting from this vertex, we move upwards because there's an E-pole here separating the thorax from the abdomen. When adding edges in the middle, it can't be snapped to the surface using snap tool only. For example, if we want to snap to this area, and we move the vertex by pressing G, snapping is based on the view angle, so now the top surface is broken. Therefore, we use another tool. Find the shrink wrap modifier. In the shrink wrap modifier, set the target object to the sculpted high poly model. Click the edit mode button, then you can see the model snapping to the high poly. Then we hide it. We'll duplicate it multiple times. The shortcut is Shift+D. We'll explain why we do this in a moment. Now, we can directly add some intermediate edges to the body. After that, the edges directly snap to the surface. We move this E-pole down a bit. We directly extrude the abdominal faces. Now, we've basically completed the edge flow for the front shoulder and the body. Next, we are going to smooth out the mesh. Currently, the edges are very uneven, dense in some areas and sparse in others, with various polygon sizes on the body. We directly enter Sculpt mode. In the Properties panel, we switch to Object and display it as wireframe only. Find Relax Brush and hold Shift-E to smooth it out. This area hasn't been merged, so it splits when smoothed. There are fewer edges. Add 2 edges here. The edges on the abdomen are also sparse. Add 1 edge here and 1 there. Add 2 edges in the middle part of the abdomen. Enter Sculpt mode again and smooth out the edges we just added. After smoothing, the mesh density of the shoulders and body parts are now even. Alright, now the topology for the body and shoulders is completed, and that puts an end to our lesson today. In the next one, we are going to topologize the hind legs.